Why should a CEO, CIO, CTO, or any leader listen to this episode?
It's this controlled environment where we have such rich data. It's really a representation of what you could do with data and to think outside the box when you apply it to winning football games. An AI model is only as good as the context that it has access to. Decision makers should still use their gut and let the numbers and the AI outputs be tools. If you've got the subject matter expertise, you're going to know when the AI output is wrong or potentially has errors. It's 20% working on the model, 30% is data pre-processing.
Welcome to Digital Storm Weekly, the podcast for leaders who don't want buzzwords but decisions. I'm Jörg Storm, and today's guest is Mike Brandt, Senior Manager, Research and Analytics of NFL Next Gen Stats. Mike leads the research and analytics for NFL. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me, and good to see you, Dr. Storm.
Mike, one question. Why should a CEO, CIO, CTO, or any leader listen to this episode? Maybe you can explain this in the next 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, when it comes to sports, it's this controlled environment where we have such rich data, and it's controlled data. So we've got games with 60 minutes of controlled stats, and it's really a representation of what you could do with data and to think outside the box when you apply it to winning football games.
This sounds like an interesting topic. You should listen. Let's go to some rapid fire questions. That Mike
Sounds
just
great.
answer in a sentence or a word. What is the most overrated football stat today?
The most overrated football stat is passer rating.
One skill every future NFL analyst must have.
One skill every analyst must have: speaking the language of football.
Tool or platform you couldn't do your job without.
We use Amazon QuickSuite as researchers and analysts every day, and we're constantly building new dashboards to do even more powerful research.
One belief about analytics you change your mind on.
That gut should still take more weight than the analytics itself, because your gut is trained on the context of experience that a lot of times the data does not truly represent.
Last one, best data insights fan completely ignore.
So from the NFL perspective, we have a data point called success rate, and it's how well you perform play to play. So do you gain the necessary yards for that given play? And it's really a really strong representation of a team's quality success over all of their plays.
Next one. Now, what's one NFL moment where the data told a complete different story than what fans thought when they saw that live on TV?
What is one moment that it was different in the numbers? So actually, I've got a relevant one for you. So we've got Super Bowl 60 coming up next week between the Patriots and the Seahawks. And the Patriots won their game last week in the AFC Championship against the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos were up 7-0, and it was the second quarter. And they decided they were at the 5-yard line. They had 5 yards to go, and it was fourth down. And they decided to go for it. And that decision by Sean Payton and the coaching staff was aggressive, but it was the right call by the numbers. Now, they did not succeed in converting on that fourth down, but the numbers suggest that the process was right. Now, fans at home, they went to social media and they condemned the decision. They said he should have taken the field goal and the automatic 3 points. But when it comes down to the NFL decision making, and what we've found in fourth down decisions, is that the advantage of scoring a touchdown is so much more valuable than a field goal, that the weight of going for the touchdown was worth more than the 3 points could have given, even in the low scoring game. And given that it was early in the second quarter, you have to assume that there's going to be more points scored in the game. They ended up losing the game 13-7, but it was a representation of a good process, not necessarily the right outcome.
Wow, that's interesting. Let's get more into the AI topic, because this is your area where you really can talk a lot. Most people think NFL analytics is just kind of something like advanced statistics. So what do you think? What's the hardest part of turning of turning tracking data into something really useful?
So when we first started with tracking data about 10 years ago, it was a lot about we had dollar bills hanging on trees that we could pluck. And it was business logic stats. It was basic arithmetic where you could take the XY location of two players and take their distance between them, and now you have a new statistic. And so, yes, that would be representative of an advanced statistic. But over time, those business logic metrics became valuable features that we fed into different machine learning models. So we might have started with more general models like logistic regression, or maybe even trees like boosted trees or random forest. But over time and over the last 6-7 years, we've gotten more into deep learning and neural networks. And over time, the architecture has gotten more and more powerful that represents a very complex stat that we need to get out of. So when you look at a football play, it is 11 players versus 11 players that move dynamically together. Everything is a network, a map. And so if you take every frame of tracking data and map it across each other in terms of frames over time, you are able to extract much more information than you could just engineering features for a logistic regression or a tree-based model.
The next question, what are the biggest challenges utilizing data and machine learning in such a live environment?
The ultimate problem is latency. And it's not latency of the data. It's latency of the data being fully ready to then be used as the actual output. And what we mean by that is when we have the tracking data, we are collecting a stream of XY data points, speed, acceleration, etc. And we also ingest events. So we know when the pass was thrown, when the pass was caught, when the tackle was made. And so we need those events to be frame accurate down to the 10th of a second in order for us to accurately calculate all of our almost 1,000 stats downstream. And so if we need to change that frame of that event by, say, 2 frames or 0.2 of a second, that will then change the output of a model potentially. It will change the distance, it'll change the features that go into it. It might not change the output, but it certainly will change some of the small features. And so because of that, we have a latency problem of how quickly we can get machine learning stats to the fans on television. So if you want to get it out instantly in an unofficial 80% accurate way, you can get it out instantly. But what we are constantly battling is how quickly can we get 100% accurate data at the play level. Then you could calculate those machine learning models in real time or near real time to then get all of those stats.
Right, clear. What do you think? What's the one metric fans see today that would have been impossible to compute, let's say, 5 years ago?
So 5 years ago was still, we were getting into the neural networks. We were using CNNs and different architectures to really extract a lot of that insight from the raw data. But what has been possible only in recent years is leveraging transformers to really bootstrap those models. And so we just launched last year with Amazon's help, data science help through their ProServe team. We actually developed a series of coverage models, which for every defensive player on the field, we now have a network of who matched up against who, what was every coverage player's role, and then who was ultimately responsible for the receiver who was targeted on the play. All of those 3 models were built using similar transformer architecture. And the lift that we got from our basic neural nets to now neural nets with transformer architecture gave us that accuracy boost that we felt much more confident in the labels than we would have if we were using some of the architecture we were using 5 years ago.
What do you think? Are there any areas of football where data has yet to add as much insight as you would like to?
That's a good question. Yeah, you could imagine that football is a lot of games within the game. And so games within the game means that it's hard to compare apples to apples. You have a lot of apples to orange situations. So what I thought would be possible by now with tracking data that I'm sure NFL teams are doing internally is trying to create metrics that represent reaction time or change of direction or instincts to be able to optimally get to the football. Now, there have been a lot of projects that we've seen out there with the Big Data Bowl, which is a Kaggle competition that we'll let some part of our data be used for fans to create new metrics. And what we have found is that there's a lot of great ideas in there. But to convert that to fully apples to apples comparisons is still a little bit of the challenge of how can we get really rich data beyond just basic speed and acceleration.
Going into more the executive level here, what's the most common way leaders misunderstand AI-driven decision making in sport? What do you think?
There's a lot of parallels, and I think it has a lot to do with context. So an AI model or an AI LLM is only as good as the context that it has access to. And so you could imagine that the context of a knowledge base that you could train on your documents or data sets or examples of certain ways that you might do things, but ultimately the value of that data leading you to the decision is the rich context that is needed for the model. And I think it's hard to gain and to get that context right in the back end of a model. And there's a little bit of a black box to it. So because of that, I actually believe that decision makers should still use their gut and let the numbers and the AI outputs be tools that can give you more confidence or question your gut. Because ultimately, I go back to that gut part of being driven by experience, by that deep down subconscious. If you've got the subject matter expertise, you're going to know when the AI output is wrong or potentially has errors. And so that's why there's still room for subject matter experts in the world of AI, because they're the ones that could call BS on the output. They're the ones that could be able to decode whether or not the output is valid. Or are you getting hallucinations? Or is the agent reaching a ceiling that then there's more context that it doesn't have that then is not being fed into the decision recommendation that you think is data-driven?
I got it. You mentioned experience. Yeah? From your experience, what part of the analytics pipeline matters more than the model itself, but gets the lead?
Another great question. This is what we deal with when we build a new model, and you might think that it is 80% of the time working on the model and 20% everything else, and it's the opposite. It's 20% working on the model. 80%, part of that 80% is data pre-processing. So the model that you're getting in terms of from a football perspective, we have essentially supervised models that we are trying to create models around. We have labels and we have a bunch of features and we're trying to optimally predict or estimate that label. And on an LLM standpoint, you've got much more of a bigger possible output space, right? It's unsupervised. There is essentially all infinite amount of outputs that could be had from a model like that. And so when you put it all together, it really does come down to the data pre-processing and how much have you created that, how much does the data pre-processing match the actual problem that you're dealing with? So we could be building a model that has to predict coverages. Well, how do you segment the tracking data? When do you start the play? When do you stop the play? How do you process the data as features from a training set? Then do you do anything special from the output side? And so a lot can go into the model, but it's really going to come down to the data pre-processing, obviously feature engineering, but it really comes down to the art of creating the problem because the model can only build off of what you've created for it.
Mike, AWS. AWS is deeply embedded in the next-gen stats. What does cloud AI make possible at the NFL scale that simply couldn't exist on?
So our data is terabytes big. And so when you talk about training a model, you could definitely take samples of tracking data down and try to train a model. But to be able to train a model on a full seasons or 10 seasons of tracking data is too intensive for you to do on your own machine. And so with that, we use a lot of AWS platforms, whether it's SageMaker, we use different tooling to evaluate the model. We use QuickSuite to evaluate the success of the model once we have outputs. And a lot of that comes down to being able to scale up with a lot more compute and being able to leverage the cloud to do something that wouldn't be possible on your own machine.
You mentioned also before latency. How do you think about latency versus accuracy when models need to run during live broadcast?
So we know that the live broadcast has been around for many decades, and they have tried to tell statistical stories through the broadcast as much as possible. But a lot of times, the data updates so fast with the new play that you got to change the graphic accordingly, right? And so there is room for an unofficial value in real time where it is basically right. It might be off by a decimal point here and there, but the number is directionally right. And then there's the number that gets saved to the database after we finalize and go through the process of QA. When it comes to the number we save in the database, that number has to reach a standard that is beyond 95%. But when it comes down to the data that we share in broadcast real time, there's room for time to throw or air yards to be off by a fraction of a second or a fraction of a yard in exact, just because the value of getting the number in real time outweighs the exactitude that we represent the number on screen.
Now, coming to a very important question. I heard somewhere that sports overall usage pretty advanced compared to corporate world. I don't know if this is true, but what do you think? What can corporate leaders learn from AI and your NFL lessons learned? For example, what use case would you see very easy to implement?
So if we were talking with the buzzword of AI 5 years ago, I would have said that we have very controlled environments to predict labels, right? Through classification, which is a big part of machine learning in general over the last few decades. But now with AI, a lot of it comes down to being able to tell how good it is at what you think it's capable of. And let me explain. So in football and in sports, data and information is factual. There's a fact of how many points the team scored. There's a fact of where they rank in this category. And so what I've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years since the early GPT models were out was testing its capability and its accuracy of its output, and to test the capabilities within the realm of fact. And so if you're an AI leader in AI in the corporate world, but you're a sports junkie or a sports fan, you might have sports questions that you could test the model to know how good it is at a certain level of accuracy. So a year ago, if you were using an AI LLM, you might have been getting about 90% accuracy, maybe 10% hallucinations, where it would probably more or less usually bring in pre-training information that it might not have retrieved in latest information from the web in its research. But what we've seen more and more of is that because it has a much more capable web search to grab the right relevant data, you are now seeing the outputs be more true to fact across the board. So what was before 90% and 10% hallucination is now 98% and 2% hallucination. And it's only getting better. And so because of that, we can rely and trust a little bit more on the research side to get us from 0 to 60 and let a human take 60 to 100 than being able to not even trust the outputs of these models from a factual standpoint.
Coming back to the question, a use case, any use case you think this is so good, which you use it right now, this should be a use case also for corporate. Any suggestion?
The easy place to start is reporting. So what we do on a weekly basis is we write packets of research and we share it with the broadcast, we share it with teams, and we share it partially with fans online. And that research, it can be bootstrapped through with AI tools. And when it comes down to it, there is a future where our analysts are being able to scale up in the research and the reporting that we can do on a day-to-day basis that any business leader can take to their organization.
Coming to the closing questions, let's look into the future. 5 years from now, what will NFL fans take for granted that feels almost impossible today? What do you think?
What an NFL fan will take for granted 5 years from now that they don't have today is a new series of custom experiences for them to watch the game. Not just take in the game during the game, but get content before and after. So when it comes down to customization and personalization, we feel that there will be the experience for them. So you've seen it with NFL broadcasts over the years. We've done a Toy Story game. We have done a Simpsons game that broadcasted on Disney Plus. You can imagine more alt broadcasts for the youth. You can imagine an alt broadcast for analytics fans. You could imagine different broadcasts for different groups of folks, all custom to what meeting the fan at where they are. And so we believe that bringing content to the fan at their level, whether you're like me and you want everything and you want stats and you want information, or if you're a casual fan and you just want to know who your favorite players and favorite teams and how they're doing, bringing a custom and personalized experience to the fan will be revolutionary different 5 years from now than it is today.
Mike, thanks a lot for your valuable insight and your time. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Storm.
Yeah, that's it for today's Digital Storms Weekly podcast. If there's one takeaway, it's this: stop chasing AI hype and start treating real-time data as a high-stakes product where reliability, latency, only metrics. Mike's insights how NFL handles AI changed your thinking. Follow Digital Storm Weekly and share it with someone still treating AI as a tech problem instead of a business. Links to Mike, NFL, Digital Storm Weekly, find in the show notes below. And also would be great if you could like and follow our podcast. See you next time.